example. Okay. So the fetch method basically take an URL and fetch also use a keyword await. Okay. And then it's basically work inside the asynchronous function. Okay. So asynchronous functions means that the function will freeze when you hit the await method. Okay. So this function will be frozen, but the other functions in the component or other components can work. Okay. So it means that, okay, whenever you hit the await keyword, so await will return a promise object. Okay, the initial status is pending. It is meaning that um, so it's communicating with the server and then try to getting the data, and then so when he get the data successfully, then he will resolve the promise. Okay, and the promise will be fulfilled. Okay, but promise also can be failed in terms the server is busy, server is not available, or network problem. Okay, so the promise can be rejected. Okay, so all the things happen because it is working in asynchronously and give the user better experience, so that not whole page will be frozen, rather it just only freeze this function and then the other function can work. Okay, so we are using this one, wp.zybooks.com is for education purpose web API, which just provide the random weather information for next 5 days based on the zip code value. Okay, but the more sophisticated one and the realistic data, we can use the like some API like Open Weather Map or some other commercial API. Okay, so that's up to you that okay which apps you want to create, and then from where you want to get the data. And then for those commercial one, you also need to pass the API key, which you'll get when you register to their website. Okay, but for this demo, we are just going to use this one because we don't need to use any API key. We don't need to register to any website. So it's just if you send a 5-digit zip code, and then it should give you some random weather information. Okay, so we're going to use the use effect hook. So this is very handy when you want to fetch the data from a web API or web server, because the use effect will help you to when to call the async function. So for example, this is our asynchronous function, fetch forecast, which has the await keyword and the fetch function. Okay, so we are calling this function inside the use effect. Okay, and then use effect is by default render every time your component is loaded. Okay, but we can also pass some dependency array and give our variables, and then if those variables values are changes, then use effect will fire and call the fetch forecast. So which is we'll see here, like, so this is the dependency array, so you can give multiple variables if you have multiple dependencies. So for example, for this web API, we just change the zip code. So if you give the different zip code, and then use effect will call the fetch forecast again, and you get the new data. Okay, um, next, for better user experience, we can also create some other variable, like say for example, you handle the error. Like error can be happen, like say for example, you give a wrong zip code, or if the data is not available, so then you can handle those error messages. Then other thing is that since we are fetching from the web server, so sometimes it may get the longer delay. Okay, so to give user better experience, we can also can use the is loading variable using the useStat. Okay, which we can say that when the server is busy, is waiting for the or the your apps is waiting to get the data from the web API, then you can send some message that, okay, we are waiting for the data and something like that. Okay. So that's the user will know that, oh, okay, so it's basically the API communication is still on the way, something like that. Okay. So we can do this thing using useStat method, or you can say React hook. And then the other two use state we are going to use, one is forecast. Okay, since we are going to use the weather API, so we'll see that what is the forecast, using the use state. And then this is our initial variable. Okay, so initially we have an empty array, and then so we'll get the 5 days weather forecast in an array, and each day weather will come in an object. Okay, so that's why we use the array symbol here. And then zip code, so we'll give a default zip code so that at least we can see some message, some weather information rather. And then you can also can update the zip code using the set zip code method. Okay, so this all we'll see in our coding demo in the next video. So thank you and see you in the next video.